Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Piper Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Stories Change Power, and we are so glad that you're here. Welcome to the first webinar of 2026. Throughout this third year of hosting our series, we are recognizing that 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the United States Declaration of Independence, and we are focused on boosting civic engagement and building civic muscle. Put another way, these webinars are one way that we are answering a question that we hear more each and every day, and that is, how can I be part of making the United States a just and peaceful country for everyone, without exception, for our next 250 years? Like we did in our first 2 years of the series, we asked the speaker to pick a song to welcome you, and the sooner you log in, the more you get to hear. Today, Hamilton fans no doubt recognize this version of History Has Its Eyes on You. And there's a line that goes by sometimes pretty quickly, but hopefully you heard it, about greatness lies in you. And this may feel like a big thing to say on a Friday, especially if you're there off camera, still in your pajama pants and unbrushed hair, as I would be in your shoes or in your slippers. But greatness lies in you too. That can be easy to forget when there's so much going on in the world. But as Cristin will share shortly, you do not have to be Hamilton to be part of the solution these days. We will reach that soon. First, one quick note and 4 quick housekeeping reminders. Next Thursday, January 22nd, we are kicking off an inspiring 4-week course called Storytelling to Bridge Divides. We have a few spots left, and I will share a discount code with you at the end of the webinar today if you'd like to join us. 4 housekeeping reminders. 1, captions. We have them. Please use them if they're helpful to you. Second, the chat will be open throughout for discourse between the participants in the call. This is for our human friends only. This is not shared in the recording. So if you are AI, we will be kicking you out. We'll check with you first and send a direct message. So keep an eye out for your chat. We'll check with you. If you don't respond, then we err on the side of caution, and your AI is welcome to watch the recording. Questions are welcome anytime. There's a box at the bottom of your screen for Q&A. We will not read your full name, but you also have the option to ask anonymously if you prefer that option. Any questions we don't reach, we will answer later, including via bonus points on our LinkedIn page. Lastly, you are off camera and off mic, so do what you need to do to be comfortable and present. And with that, it is an absolute honor to introduce today's speaker, Cristin Brawner. Cristin Brawner leads the National Issues Forum Institute, or NIFI, a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization that is dedicated to equipping, empowering, and mobilizing people to use deliberation to take action for the public good. Her career has focused on helping communities and our democracy thrive by building partnerships, designing programs, and strengthening the civic infrastructure that enables people to talk, decide, and act together. Before joining NIFI, Cristin served as executive director of the David Matthews Center for Civic Life in Alabama. Cristin also founded the Southern Deliberative Democracy Network and is a former associate with the Kettering Foundation. Cristin, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to talk with everyone.
And before we jump into your presentation, we have a poll. Today we've got 3 questions. Those will be popping up on your screen in just a moment. If you've been with us before, you'll recognize this first one, asking how long have you been using your civic muscle? And what we mean by that is being involved in your community. Think very broadly. That can look many different ways, even if you're not a formal advocate. There are ways that you're involved. So we've got options there from new all the way up to expert. Or if you're not using your civic muscle yet, there's an option there too. Our second question is, when was the last time that you had a conversation with someone across the political divide? And we've got 4 options there. 1, just today, maybe you do every day. 2nd, within the last week or so. 3rd, at some point in the last 12 months. Or maybe 4th, you do not remember the last time, and that's okay too. We're curious to hear who's here with us today and what your experience has been. And then last question, this one you can select as many options as you'd like. In addition to those conversations across divide, what are other ways that you are civically engaged? And that includes voting in federal, including presidential elections, voting state and local, volunteering. Maybe you're cooperating with your neighbors and pitching in together, maybe working with neighbors to solve a community problem or attending public meetings. Actually, and if there's something there that you're involved in and don't see in the poll, please share that in the chat. We'll be curious to hear. And seeing good participation here, I'll give folks a few more seconds. Again, we ask these questions because it gives us a good sense of who is in the virtual room with us today, and we can adjust the presentation accordingly. So if your fingers are not yet at your keyboard, please answer the poll. If you are driving, please do not answer the poll. Keep focused. But we see some answers coming in. We'll give folks maybe another 3, 2, and I'll say if I cut you off, I do apologize. We welcome the answers in the chat as well. But let's go ahead and end that. And Cristin, we will see who we've got here today. We'll share. There we go. Looks like a great mix. We've got about 20% brand new, welcome, 20% who have been in the civic muscle space for a while, another about 20% a good long while, and then almost half pros. I know that's don't check my math there, but just giving folks a sense. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone across the political divide? About 15% every day, about 44% within the last week or so, about a third at some point in the last year, and then a little less than 10% who don't remember the last time. So welcome. We will talk about all of these options today, or all the ways to engage across the divide. And then, wowza, not surprisingly, we've got about 92% who vote in federal elections, almost 90 in state and local, a lot of volunteers, bravo, brava, about 60% attending public meetings, about half working with neighbors to solve a community problem, and 60% or so who swap help and favors with neighbors. So, Cristin, we've got some superstars. That does not surprise me. But with that, we'll stop sharing and I will hand over to you, and then I'll come back for our conversation.
Thank you, Piper. It's such a joy to be here. I'm really pleased to see so many folks who um, take advantage of opportunities to attend public meetings and work with others to solve problems in their communities, as those are two things we'll be touching on a lot today. And in general, most Americans do not participate in those ways in their communities. And so glad to be, in Piper's words, among such a group of superstars. Really excited to be with you all today. As Piper said, I'm Cristin Brawner, Executive Director of the National Issues Forums Institute. Before we dive in, I want to extend a huge thank you to Stories Change Power, and particularly to Piper Hendricks for hosting today's conversation and for being such a thoughtful partner in this work. I also want to thank you for showing up today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and hope you'll put lots of questions into the chat. Today, I'm thrilled and excited to offer a sneak peek of What's Next America, a new initiative we'll be formally launching next month as part of the lead up to our nation's 250th birthday. This is an early look at where the work is headed and how it builds on decades of deliberative civic engagement work that has been going on, focused on strengthening civic life. And I am ready for those PowerPoint slides to share a little bit more. Uh, right. Before we get started in talking about What's Next America, I'd love to introduce the National Issues Forums Institute to those of you who may never have interacted with us before. And Rebecca, next slide, please. If this is your first time getting to know us, I'm so excited we get the chance to meet. At the National Issues Forums Institute, we start with a very simple core belief that addressing or solving public problems requires public participation. So what does that mean in practical terms? We believe that those closest to the problems our communities and nation face must be involved in addressing those problems. Community members should not be pushed to the sidelines, but must play a role in defining the issues that impact their lives, but also in being part of the solution to those problems. For more than 40 years, NIFI has been working to do just that. We do that by equipping, empowering, and mobilizing people to use deliberation to take action for the public good. For us, that means equipping people with tools for public decision making, empowering them with the skills and confidence to engage complex public issues, and mobilizing networks of practitioners, educators, scholars, and community leaders who are committed to strengthening civic life. So if you've never participated in a National Issues Forum, what does that look like? NIF forums are deliberative conversations in classrooms, on campuses, or in communities that are locally convened, nonpartisan, multi-perspective, deliberative discussions on issues that affect our communities and the nation as a whole. They're generally led by volunteer moderators who help groups weigh choices, consider trade-offs, and identify shared direction for action. To support those moderators, we at NIFI produce nonpartisan discussion guides on national issues. But we also work with individuals and organizations, I believe a handful of whom are on this call today, that and work with them to frame local and regional issues for deliberation as well. Before going further, I think it's helpful to ground ourselves in what we mean by deliberation. Next slide, please. Deliberation is a democratic practice for addressing complex issues and solving public problems. It involves considering diverse perspectives, weighing options and trade-offs, and identifying common ground for taking action for the public good. At NIFI, we believe talking isn't enough, so we use the Talk, Decide, Act framework to describe our work. Deliberation isn't just about conversation, it's about helping people make shared judgments and take shared responsibility. Deliberation offers community members and others the opportunity to make informed decisions that lead to real action in their towns. Although at NIFI we do not advocate for particular solutions to issues, we help people build skills for moving from talk to action and solving problems in their communities and on their campuses. I want to be clear though, deliberation is a key civic skill, but it is not a silver bullet solution. It's also not the only form of civil discourse that's necessary to a thriving civic life. When done well, we also need good debate that can help us choose among candidates, party platforms, and elevate better arguments for why we should be doing something. We also need dialogue, which helps us bridge divides and increase understanding. Next slide, please. Over the years, NIFI has developed a set of tools to support this kind of deliberative work. Most notably, our nonpartisan deliberative discussion guides, along with workshops and training materials for people convening and moderating these conversations. We also work with individuals and organizations across the country to equip them to frame local and regional issues for deliberation. These tools don't tell communities what or how to think. Our resources help people work through difficult public problems, especially when issues are complex and values are in tension with each other. We often describe deliberation as an opportunity to talk with and not at each other and work through issues rather than yell sound bites around an issue at one another. If you're not familiar with our guides, they begin with introductory and background information on the issue, but then turn the focus to problem solving. Each issue guide includes 3 or 4 approaches or possible solutions for addressing the issue that includes possible actions and potential trade-offs to consider. These guides are designed to focus the conversation on the issue or problem at hand rather than party platforms or personalities. That shift helps move people beyond the binary of debate, and it puts participants into the driver's seat, asking them to see themselves as actors and collaborative problem solvers. I know my friend Martine Carcassonne is on this call as well. I encourage you to check out some of the resources that he has about why deliberative issue framing can be an effective tool to bring out the best in human nature without inflaming the worst aspects of human nature and tribalism. We don't have time to get into that today, but that's a really wonderful rabbit hole to go down as well. All right, next slide, please. So this deliberative talk, decide, act approach is especially important in our view right now. National research from More in Common US through the Connection Opportunity Report shows that while a strong majority of Americans feel a responsibility to engage across difference, they prefer collaborative, goal-oriented efforts over dialogue alone. So structural opportunities to actually act together. But those structural opportunities to act together often remain limited in their communities. That gap between intention and opportunity is exactly where What's Next America comes in, positioning deliberation as a way to move from talk to collaborative action and to rebuild civic trust in the process. In reading this report, I was struck by the finding that More in Common found that people actually bridge divides by doing something together, not just talking about their differences. That really was thought-provoking and gave us a lot to think about at NIFI for sure. All right, next slide, please. So building on what we've learned through helping communities talk, decide, and act together for 40 years, in 2026, to mark our nation's 250th birthday, the National Issues Forums Institute and many, many partners, both locally, regionally, and statewide across the country, are working to launch What's Next America. The initiative will provide tools and resources for Americans to address a challenge or build on an opportunity in their neighborhoods, communities, classrooms, and beyond. It's designed to elevate local problem solving, connect civic actors, and answer a forward looking, what we hope is a hopeful question: what's next, America? This model builds on years of deliberative work done by NIFI's former president and the former executive director of the West Virginia Center for Civic Life, the incredible Betty Knighton, who I believe is on this webinar today as well. Her work through What's Next West Virginia was a model for work that I got to do in my previous role as executive director of the David Matthews Center for Civic Life in Alabama, where I had the privilege of conducting a similar initiative, What's Next Alabama, as a lead up to Alabama's bicentennial in 2019. Next slide, please. At its core, What's Next America invites Americans to deliberate when values collide, trade-offs are real, and shared responsibility matters. The initiative is grounded in the belief that civic muscle is built not through one-off conversations, but through repeated opportunities to talk, decide, and act better together. Or if you've been watching Ken Burns' American Revolution documentary, a better way to put it might be struggling better together, because sometimes we have a tendency to look at the past and see it as one smooth, linear process that was inevitable, when really so much of the work that led to the high points in our nation's history what was a real struggle, and there was great disagreement. Um, this What's Next America model builds on years of deliberative work done by so many, including Betty Knighton, and we're really excited to pilot it across the country. All right, next slide, please. What's Next America is designed to support local civic infrastructure, equip civic actors with tools and training, and catalyze local action through follow-up and storytelling. And we're with the overall goal of strengthening civic health for our country. We'll be tracking and very interested in outcomes like increases in collaboration, a sense of belonging, and improved civic efficacy as Americans talk, decide, and act together. Very importantly, this work is locally led and nationally supported, which is a core operating principle for us at National Issues Forums Institute. All of the tools and resources that we're creating will be very adaptable for local context and easily able to be changed. We even encourage folks to rename and rebrand their local initiatives. For example, I live in a neighborhood called Sugar Valley, so we would encourage neighborhoods to call their initiatives What's Next Sugar Valley, or I live in Nashville, Tennessee. What's Next Nashville? What's Next Tennessee? So working to really create that sense of shared ownership and identity around these conversations. Next slide, please. I wanted to give a quick sense of the timeline before I talk about some of the nuts and bolts. We're currently in the final planning and development phase, moving toward a formal program launch next month. From there, we'll be piloting these What's Next conversations across the country between February and June, with the formal hard launch kickoff immediately following July 4th, so July 5th, 2026. And starting in July, we'll be working with a broader range of partners across the country to host these conversations in that 251st year to kick off America's Next 250, helping people talk, decide, and act together and build those civic muscles for the next 250 years. Come Constitution Day, September 2027, we'll begin reporting out on the stories that we're hearing, the themes that are emerging, and the local actions that are taking place. But we see this as a launching point to the next decade of work leading up to the 250th anniversary of the Constitution, creating and working with and supporting more opportunities for Americans to work better together in their communities. A key aspect of that is that we also hope this summer to begin launching a community mini grant funding, where we're able to provide some follow-up support for communities that actually want to move to creating more civic infrastructure in their communities and moving towards that action piece. All right, next slide, please. So now I wanted to share a little bit more about some of the nuts and bolts and resources of What's Next America. At the launch, we'll include several interconnected resources, deliberative discussion guides, tailored toolkits for communities, higher ed campuses, and also K-12 classrooms. We will also provide regular coaching and training opportunities, monthly opportunities to meet with our team, as well as other very experienced conversation conveners and moderators to gain tools, resources, and community of support. And we'll provide evaluation and story gathering efforts. Not only are we working to create evaluation methods for the program nationally, but also working with local partners to adapt and create evaluation tools that are useful for their context, that they can use to identify and secure local funding for their initiatives and to help really develop the capacity that they have locally. The National Issues Forums Institute is funding the development of the program. We've also secured a U.S. Department of Education grant to fund the K-12 initiative. We also recently found out that we received a higher ed grant from the U.S. Department of Education, although not specifically focused on the 250th, does help us provide more resources and tools for higher education campuses as well. A quick word about the What's Next deliberative discussion guide. Unlike NIFI's traditional discussion guides, which focus on helping people weigh different approaches to a specific issue, the What's Next America guide starts one step earlier. It will help communities identify a challenge they want to tackle or an opportunity they want to build on based on what matters to them locally. The guide will then walk participants through framing the issue for deliberation, considering different perspectives and trade-offs, and deciding what they can do together next. In short, it's designed not just to support good conversation, but to help communities move from talking to taking action. We also realize that not every group, community, or campus is ready to select an opportunity to build on or a challenge to address. Many would like to start with foundational deliberative conversations on our values leading up to the 250th and far beyond. We're grateful to have partners like Dr. Martine Carcassonne, who I believe is on this call as well, director of the Center for Public Deliberation at Colorado State University. He is working with us to create conversation guides and tools for those important conversations on values. And highly encourage you to check out some of Martine's previous work related to values and helping people work through those tensions before getting into that collaborative problem solving mindset that deliberation really fosters. All right, next slide, please. Because this is a preview, I really want to emphasize that there are many ways to get involved as we move toward the launch of What's Next America. We see this as a collaborative effort, and we're excited to walk alongside partners who are already doing meaningful civic work. We'd love to have you complete the interest form and connect with us today to share how we might be able to support the great work that you're doing locally and to provide resources and connection and networking to other communities that are doing this type of work across the country. All right, I'll pause here. That was sort of the 30,000-foot overview of the initiative, and I'm looking forward to talking with Piper before opening up to questions to the rest of you. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk through the key aspects and nuts and bolts of What's Next America.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing, Krista. I mean, this is exciting, and we're seeing the enthusiasm already in the chat. Really excited to see so much is happening already with many civic groups and how much interest there is in the resources that you've created. I'd love to take a step back just a moment and can you share what inspired you to create this What Next America initiative and like why you thought, okay, this is the kind of work we need to see more of nationwide?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. So it really started at the beginning of my career when I started working with communities to host deliberative forums on specific issues and saw that when they were deliberating on one issue, inevitably 10 other issues emerged. That's the nature of wicked problems, right? They're interconnected and when we feel like we're moving towards solving one, another one crops up and just saw that there were so many needs and opportunities for people to work through and identify those challenges together, those issues that they want to work through and then move to action. But what really sparked my desire to do something like this and that keeps me connected to this work is work that I got to do with middle school students in the
Mm,
town of Montevallo, Alabama. This was 12 or 13 years ago now. The young people were hosting community conversations and forums on opportunity gaps for youth in their communities and that highlighting that there weren't many opportunities for young people to be involved. Well, we helped them finish moderating that series, and the adults in the room were pretty satisfied with how it had gone. There were concerns to relay to local elected officials, to the Department of Education, but the youth were not happy at all. They kept asking, "Well, what's next? What can we do? How are we going to actually solve these problems?" And we quickly realized they wanted to be part of the action, not just share their perspective and give their opinion. And so that's what really persuaded me that opportunities for people to not just talk together but really to be a part of the action and develop that sense of civic efficacy and be given more opportunities to see themselves as leaders, regardless of their age or their background in their communities. And then when I learned what my friend and colleague Betty Knighton was doing with What's Next West Virginia, that so perfectly encapsulated that talk, decide, and act model that I thought this is what I want to dedicate my career to. And what better opportunity than when our nation is turning 250 then to not only look back at the past, but also say, are we ready? Do we have those civic muscles for the next 250 years? And how can we work better together where it matters most in our backyards, but also across the country?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And that there's a lot of conversation about how that civic muscle has maybe atrophied for a lot of folks.
Mhm.
As we have technology, as we have more distractions, from our role as being involved in communities, there's, a lot of smart work around the fact that we've become really good consumers, but we're
Mhm.
not as focused on being engaged as
Mhm.
citizens. And I say that not as an immigration status, but as a member of the community, having that reciprocal relationship with your community and your country. And so, like
Mhm.
any other muscle, we need to practice, getting it used again. And I think a lot of folks on the call, we can tell are strapping with that civic muscle, and other folks around the country may need some support. And another theme
Mhm.
in a lot of conversations is that moving from the talk into action. It's something that we
Mhm.
focused on at Braver Angels with the citizen-led
Mhm.
solutions. And I'm
Mhm.
curious if you have an example of a particular, something that where you can give folks something at concrete. Let's move from that deciding and
Mhm.
focusing and talking together into, all right, here's what we're going to do, and then how that shaped this initiative.
Mhm. Absolutely. So I'll go back to those young people in the town
Mhm.
of Montevallo. They started based on the decisions that were made during that community forum series, that deliberative series. The students started actually working with folks to make some of those things happen. They started a junior city council with the support of their wonderful mayor, Dr. Holocaust, who incidentally is my board chair. Um, they also worked to make sure that their voice was represented at in conversations with the Board of Education for changing some of the things that they were really concerned about. They started a youth community center. They worked with their Main Street program to encourage young people to shop at local businesses instead in their rural town instead of driving to the suburb 20 minutes down the road by creating little cards where students got a 10% discount if they use their free period to go get lunch at a local restaurant instead of buying someplace else. And so they created really concrete opportunities to address the issues and challenges that they had identified. And none of these students had a fancy title or were connected to any real source of power in the community or what we would think of as traditional
Mhm.
power in the community. Other than a supportive mayor and principal, which was incredibly helpful. And so seeing that really informed this process, this idea, and my desire to help more Americans have that spark go off for them, like
Mhm.
those students, where they say, "Oh, I do have power working with others in my community. I do have a voice, but I also can be a part of the solution. I have creative solutions for the problems that I see in the community." So that really informed our approach and our desire to focus this around collaborative problem solving and opportunities for people to develop that sense that I have a voice in my community and our country's future, but I also have a role to play and a responsibility in helping to make the community the place that I want to live and this country the place that I want to live.
I really appreciate that. It makes me think of the greatness in all of us. No matter how old we are, no matter our title, there's space to be impactful. And even as I say that, I don't want to make it sound too easy. I'm curious if you've got
Mhm.
examples of, are there things that people underestimate about maybe their own capacity, but also some of the challenges that they may face.
Absolutely. I think many of us have the sense that the the work falls on our shoulders. If we feel the sense of calling or the sense of need in our communities or for our country, we can often feel this great sense of burden that it's up to us in some way. And while it's good to have a sense of responsibility for the future, this work isn't meant to be done alone. And so I remind myself all the time, we should not do anything without partnership. But the same is true for us as individuals. We can't do this work alone. And so that does look like reaching out to the neighbor next door or just trying to find other people who care about similar issues in your community and not trying to do it alone. We always encourage people start with other by developing a group of people who care, finding the other people who care in your community about the issue that you care about or the shared future of your town or your community. And so starting there helps make it a little bit more manageable and also give the sense of possibility. And then each of us, this work requires deep emotional labor. And so we need that community of support as well for doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some great examples of championing a cause, but in coalition, that can mean, we're all lifting that together rather than having to be, sometimes people think of the word champion and think that's got to be a 24/7 role. And it doesn't. It doesn't. We're getting some great questions here. I want to turn to some from our participants. How do you slash will you keep the deliberative process truly nonpartisan, including who self-selects to participate, or which issues are chosen for problem solving?
Absolutely. So this is the big challenge.
Hmm.
For us, it has always looked like working with local conveners who themselves are trusted messengers who partner with others. So, for example, maybe it's the library or the United Way, which are generally seen as fairly nonpartisan in their community. But any group who wants to host these conversations, we will from the get-go encourage them to create a broad coalition to host the conversations in their community. None of us, no matter how well connected our local nonprofit might be or our group or organization might be, we need to have partners in the work. And so a diverse range of partners from the beginning. Although we can't control the issues that people select, the training and support that we will provide will be very much focused on how can you frame those issues for deliberation, not for debate, and to help people have the tools for looking at it from multiple perspectives. So that'll be on us and on how we create the discussion guide and the accompanying tools and how we train moderators for doing this work. There will also be a process for those who want to pilot this effort and or adapt it and change the name for their local conversation where they will have to meet with us so we can make sure that it's not, what's next for the neo-Nazis in the area.
Yeah.
So we will have a screening process for who is able to officially call it a what's next conversation.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Next question here is, what do you suggest when citizens do not have the support of their city council? Someone's reading my mind. You mentioned that there were supportive policymakers, and I thought, that is a lucky thing. So what do you do when citizens do not have the support of their city council, which chooses to rule to the disadvantage of the average citizen and is deeply politicized?
Mhm. Yeah, we get this question a lot. I face this in many, many communities I've worked with before. Um, And I would say it helps to have the support of local decision makers, but is
Mhm.
not essential. This is a way for you to also create civic infrastructure that is does not require government participation. It's wonderful if you have local elected officials supportive, but it's not necessary. The work that you do together could be to start more civic infrastructure efforts for your community. So you don't need anyone's permission to do this type of work. You certainly don't need local elected officials permission. So we will always encourage partners reach out, invite, extend the
Mhm.
invitation. But if it doesn't if it doesn't work out and there's no support or even active antipathy from local elected officials, you don't have to have permission to start these types of conversations in your communities with other people who want to see more active engagement from their neighbors. Yeah,
Yeah.
we the people. This is an opportunity for us to exercise that we the peopleness, whether there's support or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, looking across the country, so many different examples are places where there's a lot of support, really engaged policymakers, and other times, as you're saying, where it feels like that's not even just neutral, it's, working against folks. And so that the good news is that as we were all communicating, seeing those examples, what's working in places that are maybe similarly situated can be helpful, whether that's because you have a policymaker who's on board and really enthusiastic already, or someone who needs to be invited to that civic assembly, or needs to be invited, or more conversations, or maybe just worked around sometimes. So
Mhm.
we've got a question. Yeah,
Absolutely.
go ahead.
And even if you have support, you don't want to just stick with city hall or your county government, whatever the elected entity might be, but really thinking through where where are the tables where people are already meeting and having conversations? Oftentimes, when we think about dialogue deliberation work, the first thing that comes to mind is how do we invite people to the table that we're creating? When I always try to encourage folks and encourage myself, don't assume that we're setting the table. Many of the tables are
Mhm.
already set in the community. So finding out where conversations are already happening in the community and seeing if there are ways to bridge those tables, bring them together, whether that's with support through local elected officials or conveners like United Way or libraries and others. Um, but a great first place to start, especially if you don't have that type of support, could also be finding the tables where people are already talking with one another.
Love that.
Sorry, that
Absolutely.
occurred to me because of the comments you made, Piper. So I wanted to throw that
Yeah,
in.
no, absolutely. And we're loving all these questions, everybody. I'll go to Douglas is asking, can these communities be professional networks that extend throughout the US as opposed to geographically based community? Good question.
Absolutely. So I'll call out great work by the wonderful Betty Knighton again. Not only did What's Next West Virginia have many very local conversations about particular, cities, towns, counties, but also there were networks across the state that had their own, like What's Next philanthropy conversations. And so I could envision similar efforts for professional groups and societies and organizations. We're not putting a constraint on how people define community. We do envision that a lot of these conversations will happen in a geographic shared community, but that the structure works well for other types of communities. So great question. Yeah, I love the creativity and thinking through how you can use it.
Yeah, I love it. And as a recovering lawyer, I will say I'm very proud of a lot of the things that the ABA is doing with a lot of initiatives. And so good things, any and all professions, welcome to this work. From Bruce, we have a question. What do you suggest for bringing this work to college classrooms and campuses? Something that he is teaching right now. Thank you for that, Bruce.
Absolutely. So not only are we creating campus toolkits and resources, but I also want to highly recommend the values exercise that I mentioned earlier from Martine Carcassonne and the Center for Public Deliberation at Colorado State University. That's a excellent use on college campuses that works really well, not only in classroom settings, but also co-curricular settings. And then deliberative work that's being done by Graham Bullock at Davidson College, specifically related to the 250th. And so a lot of the deliberative tools that Graham and his team have developed focus on the ideals of the past, but also that have enduring um, disagreement around in the present. So those would be some great resources in addition to the tools that we're utilizing. And we see this as being very adaptable to many types of college settings. So classroom conversations, but also student groups across the campus, student government, faculty senate, and both, co-curricular and curricular opportunities. We're actually presenting next week at AAC&U, a handful of us are, about utilizing the What's Next approach on college campuses. So we'll post those resources after we share them at AAC&U next week. So yeah, we also welcome suggestions. Are there things that you would need on your college campus to make this work well for you?
That is exciting. And I don't know if More Like Us is a part of that group. When our former speaker, James Cohen, is now focusing their work on college campuses. So a lot of exciting work there. I think there's a whole civic studies program that's growing. So excited to hear that you're working on college campuses and with students.
Absolutely. And we did just receive, I mentioned it briefly in the presentation, we did just receive funding from the US Department of Education to create more campus focused, specifically issue guides on difficult issues facing college campuses over the next 4 years. So we'll be creating about 40 new discussion guides that are specifically
Fabulous.
useful for college settings. So yeah, send me or Don Harfman, our program coordinator, an email if you want to learn more about that, and we'll share more as new things are announced with that program.
That is exciting. And I love this question from Craig. What suggestions do you have to gather all diverse voices from the community? And it is tough. I hear in that word and in that question, people who may be deeply polarized and disagreeing. So do you have suggestions for folks?
Absolutely. I think I always remind myself to start with a place of humility that I'm not starting this conversation. I'm very likely not the first one asking these types of questions in my community. And so looking around to see who else is having conversations around issues, maybe not the issue I'm interested in, but just trying to find those other tables and groups across the community. And when you do that, if you are truly doing that around your community, you will be gathering a very diverse group of folks. When you talk to somebody about an issue or about doing something like this, ask who else do you think would be interested in your community? And so creating that web that keeps building out so that you're not the hub of a spoke in a wheel, but rather
Mhm.
helping to create these webs of connections across the community. So I think that's where I would encourage folks to start, is start by building that web in your community.
Yep. I'd also recommend there's a quick read called The Art of Relevance that talks about how just because a door looks like it's open to you doesn't mean everybody's going to see that door and walk through it. So a helpful
Mhm.
way to really be mindful when we're bringing people to conversations to think beyond our own network. I'm not fully summarizing that as well as I could, but I'd recommend that book and we'll include it in the resources that we'll include in the recording. And I'm betting that some folks, if you've got suggestions too, please pop those in the chat and we can include those in the resources. I'm going to take the liberty to add another question here before we go back to all the great questions we're getting in the Q&A. I can't not go, that's too many negatives, but I have to ask a question about stories. What kind of stories are you most hoping that you'll see and have people share through this initiative?
Mhm. I want to see or hear the stories of people working together and finding unique solutions for the things that they care about in their communities, but also of learning and understanding each other better. One of the best
Mm,
and most frustrating parts for me, having moderated hundreds of these types of conversations in communities, is when even in a very tiny town, people in the room, even among a group of no more than 30, will discover that there's something they didn't know about their town or someone they didn't know. And so I can't wait to hear those stories of realizing the assets that are in their communities, whether it's
mm.
their fellow community members, or programs or resources or opportunities that they didn't realize existed in their community. What I'm most excited about is sharing. Um, our hope is to share a report and map that is a living document that we add to all the time of Americans at work. I think so often we get stuck in the narrative of how dysfunctional our government is, not only at the federal level, but sometimes at the state and local level as well. And we lean into and live into the divisions and the difficulties that we face as a country. And so I'm excited to hear the stories about how people are making a difference locally and at the state and regional level as well, and weaving that together to show that there is a lot to be hopeful and optimistic about, and a lot that can be done in the midst of people's frustrations on both sides of the aisle related to where we are as a country and where we're headed. So I'm really excited to hear those stories that help feed the hope that is essential to do any type of work with communities.
Yeah, I love that, Kristen. I sometimes feel spoiled, if I can put it that way, being in this space and hearing so many inspiring stories at the local level. And I don't know where I would be had I not heard those, because there is so much going on, around the country, around the world. And so just knowing how many people are hard at work and how they're really making an impact is so helpful. We've got a couple, let's see, a question coming in. I like the focus theme of celebrating our 250th anniversary, but can you paint a clear and specific picture of what a 250 dialogue project or event might look like? Tons of organizations are talking about 250 events, which is true. There's also a lot who aren't. I remember talking to some folks last fall in a communication space specifically where the 250th was not even on their radar screen. So good to hear that's growing. What would you tell people? What specifically can they expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been delighted to see that there are a plethora of opportunities for people to share stories and connect and learn about the history and look at the past. I think that the gap that we're hoping to fill is that pivot to look towards the future, the what's next question.
Mm,
And so very practically, this will look very different across the country. People will be adapting this for their local context. We're going to strongly encourage that. And so it might look like a gathering or a series of gatherings in your local library where people are inviting more people as the conversation builds and as they move toward identifying things that they would like to do together. And it will look messy. It will not be straightforward or linear in many ways. It will be frustrating because we live in geographic communities and share geographic communities with people we disagree with and often sometimes don't like. And so this is an opportunity to find areas of common ground, even despite those differences. And oftentimes having those deep differences in the room is going to help actually make the outcome, the conversation better. I think that the more we can also make real the examples from our history, and this will be in some of the intro materials for the discussion guide, the reality of the fact that we have deeply disagreed throughout our nation's history. And
Mhm.
even in the founding, it wasn't like all folks living in what's now the United States of America were excited about this idea of independence from Great Britain. And in fact, 250 years ago this month was the release of Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense. And prior to that, much of the efforts related to the what we now call the American Revolution were really an effort to achieve self-government governance within the British Empire. But the release of Common Sense really shifted the narrative to that of independence. But the conversations were very messy, and they were happening in all sorts of places, in pubs and houses of worship, and the sort of where you might expect it, but in the highways and byways. And we hope. We do not anticipate that we will spark as much conversation as Thomas Paine's Common Sense, but we do hope that this is an opportunity for us to really be forward looking,
Mhm.
acknowledge and recognize the past while looking to the future and what we can do together and how we can build that civic muscle. But if you know of other efforts that are really working to build that civic muscle and help people talk, decide, and act for the future of the country, please let us know. We'd love to partner and make sure that we're supporting great work that's already happening.
And that is a great segue into a question I'll ask in just a moment. I would also suggest folks to check out the two loops model, and that's something I'll get out of the way here. You can see our logo is based on that, where it's this notion of something coming to an end, a certain system, a certain era, and there's not. You'll see that the space between the two, between the red and blue and yellow, the yellow is that new loop, the new system that's emerging. And so at Stories Change Power, we envision that yellow loop being part of those next 250 years. And there's not a clear roadmap always between the two. It can be really messy. And but recognizing that something is there and already emerging is a helpful way to visualize. So we'll include that. I know people will tease me sometimes about how many times in a webinar I'll say we'll include that in the resources, but we'll include that in the resources because we know we can't cover everything in just an hour. So so leading into this notion of working across the country, if you work with a national organization, what do you suggest is the best approach for amplifying this opportunity? Are you at NIFI interested in partnership opportunities? Should they point people directly to the interest form? Where would you have people go?
Yes, absolutely. Fill out the interest form, send me an email. I'll drop my email in the chat, or that can go out with the resources, Piper, if you want. Would love to connect and have those conversations over the next several months. Yeah, absolutely. And then from one national organization to other national organizations, I would say the uplifting and amplifying that we really want to see is the work that's already happening locally. And so we never want to be a nonprofit that just drops top-down resources onto people and communities, but that we're working with folks over the next several months at the local and state level. And I see some of our partners who are working at the state level are on this call as well. We're trying to learn from them. What is actually working in these conversations as we help to provide support and resources. How can we uplift and amplify what's going on in the community level? Yeah, so a word of caution for me, something that I'm trying to take to heart is as we're working with local and state level entities, making sure that we're asking more questions, and trying to support and uplift the work that's being done, where the rubber meets the road. But yes, please reach out. We would love to partner. We will be launching what'snextamerica.com very, very soon. And on that page, we would love to not only list partners, but we want to share the work that you're doing around this and find ways that we can just uplift each other's work. And we would be delighted to have that partnership as well.
Which leads into Chris's question here. With all the work that's going on, is there a database or list of projects, organizations, best practices for multi-stakeholder efforts that has led to measurable outcomes, policies, ordinances, et cetera? In particular, is there something for a regional framework or perspective? And I'm going to group source this. There's such great activity in the chat. So if there are ideas there already, or if you've got other things, please chime in. Chris notes that engaging elected officials over time would be a bonus. So do you know of any resources like that, Cristin?
I cannot think of specific like reports or
Hmm.
examples at the moment, but some places to start looking would be National Civic League. I think National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation might also have some of those stories. That is something we're hoping to also collect through this, because I know that there are many groups working regionally and at the state level, um, and that would have good examples of this. But we have not done for our 40-year history, have not had a real emphasis on collecting some of those stories to show how this work works at those levels. And so that's a big emphasis for what's next, to be able to help share and show that story as we move forward.
Yeah, great
But yeah, can't wait to
question.
hear what people put in the chat. I'm sure there's
Yes.
amazing resources.
Yes, and we will be looking through that and sharing more, everybody. So if the chat's going by really quickly, don't worry. We'll pull out all the gems and share. Let's see, we've got a question from Jesse about the in NIFI issue guides. You offer the preloaded approaches for topics. Will this be the case also for What's Next America? How will you approach this?
Yeah, this is very different. This is new for us. It's not the three approach framework, but a much more open-ended one that helps a community in our language frame those types of approaches for themselves. So it follows a broad structure of three series of questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there after an issue or an opportunity is identified, to help people identify those possible solutions and approaches, but also work through and weigh the trade-offs that might accompany those. So this is a new approach for us. We also envision that this will lead to the surfacing of so many different issues that we will then frame in our more traditional three to four approach model. Between now and the 250th of the Constitution, we will be creating a lot of discussion guides in the next decade for sure.
I love it. I'll be so curious to know where there are things that are very, geographic specific or where we're seeing, commonalities bubble up and where we can learn from each other across, all 50 states, which is exciting. Douglas has a fantastic question here. What storytelling techniques and characteristics tend to resonate with most Americans and cut across political and cultural divides? I will tell you, Cristin, I have thoughts that would go well beyond an hour-long webinar. So Douglas, I have a feeling that's going to be in one of our bonus point posts on LinkedIn. But Cristin, do you have any thoughts off the top of your head?
I think actually this is an area I would much prefer to defer to you. The thing that comes to mind for me, or what we're hoping, part of the story we're hoping to tell through this, is that sense of we the people, where we are the highest office holders in the land. The role that we play is incredibly important. And part of that role is to be involved in working through issues and challenges, making decisions and acting together in our communities. And so that greater sense, that greater story of it is we the people, it's up to us. We have to do this work together. And if we're not pleased with how things are going in our community, in our state, or at a national level, it's up to us. And so I think that that's the narrative I want. I think connects with many people across the aisle, that sense of we the people. But I'm curious to see if it does or not. And Piper, I really want to hear your thoughts on this. If you could share anything that,
I have many. I have many, and I'll share those in a blog post. I'll also say I am so excited with this whole series this year. We've got several folks who will talk about narrative. Next month, Bridge Entertainment Labs will be our
Mm,
featured guest, talking about the story of us. We also have Democracy 2076 coming up, where they'll talk about narrative work they've done with Harmony Labs. We also have the Baha'i Office of Public Affairs that's been doing a lot of work on narrative. So lots and lots of thoughts, but I recognize we're getting up to the end of our hour, so I'll save those for now. We've got a great question from Martine, who said that we mentioned the new higher ed grant and new discussion guides, but can you talk about the Centers for Public Life Training that will be part of it as well,
mm.
for those who are in higher ed who wanted to learn a little bit more about this work and how to do it?
Absolutely, yes. And I'm grateful for folks like Martine who've been part of that work for well over a decade and will be helping us with that. So this is the background I come from, working with a state level center for civic life for many years. We're very excited to restart some of that work that was initially hosted and housed at the Kettering Foundation in Dayton, Ohio. And that work really helps um, organizations, specifically for this grant, those that are on higher ed campuses, think through that civic role of how to be a resource on their campus for sparking greater deliberation around difficult issues, get training with the pedagogy for classroom instruction related to deliberation in the classroom, but also being a resource like Martine Center is, as well as others across the country for local communities to tighten that gap that's often there between the town and gown divide between communities and
Mhm.
campuses. And so building a whole host of civic resources and opportunities for their region and being part of connecting that web of civic opportunities on campus and beyond. More will be announced soon. We just received notice of the funding, but we can't wait to announce in the next month or so. And that initiative is being led alongside James Madison University and Dr. Kara Dillard. I want to shout out her and the great work she did to secure that grant. And so we'll be in touch soon with a lot more details. But we're very interested in helping centers on higher ed campuses think through their civic role and how they can help not only engage their students in deliberation and building those civic skills, but also how they can be a resource for their community and their region as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that is fabulous. I've got two more questions to sneak in. One, for someone who's listening today, realistically, what is the first step they could take to start putting these tools to work in their own context?
Absolutely. I would say if you don't feel like you're very connected in your community, start by talking to your neighbors and see if this is a conversation you want to have on your block, or if there's something that you all want to do together, right in that very, very close geographic community. If there's an issue that's been bothering you in your town for a while, or there's an opportunity that you see, but you're not sure other people see, or folks know about, but there's no impetus around making something happen around it, this is probably a useful tool for you. And so start by finding the other people who care about that opportunity or want to see that issue addressed in your community and have conversations with them about how they want to move forward and bring in more people into the conversation. And then love it if you would talk to us. We'd be happy to provide support and also to connect you to the people who are doing this work in your state. I think that is where um, the real the real assistance and where people can show up for each other, where that happens. And we'd love to be a part of helping connect you.
And last question, with all that we've covered today, if there is one thing that you want folks to remember, what is that thing?
That they have power. I love the name of your nonprofit, Piper, that stories change power. We want people to see themselves as having civic efficacy in their communities. And we hope that this is one among many opportunities for them to develop that sense.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. When we talk about stories changing power, it starts with the stories that we tell ourselves. So thank
Mhm.
you everyone for making time to join us today. Clearly, the story you are telling yourself is that you matter and can make a difference, and we fully agree. We're going to share links in the chat to learn more about NIFI's work, including the sign up link. We'll go through all of the resources that have been shared and include those in the follow-up email. And now I promised a code for the Storytelling to Bridge Divides course that will start next Thursday. It's 4 weeks, and we are so excited to be offering this course. The code is webinar, all caps webinar to save $30. We would love to see you there. If you register and we're already full by the time you register, just let us know in the contact form on our website, and we'll be in touch directly when we have the next dates up. I hope that everyone will join us in February for the conversation with Bridge Entertainment Labs about the new American stories of us. We really value your feedback, so please be a helper and share your thoughts in the 15-second poll that will pop up when you log off. Until next time, everyone, be well, do good, stay healthy and hopeful, and we will see you soon. Thank you, Cristin.
Thank you.